The night Cameron Drake's world unraveled began with a single photo. One fleeting, stolen moment captured by a lens sharper than his entire security network. A kiss under the dim glow of his penthouse terrace, his hand tracing the curve of Elara Quinn's back like it had never left, her head tipped toward him in a way that spoke of decades of desire condensed into one dangerous second. By morning, the city had exploded. The photo was everywhere. Tweets, feeds, flashing in 1,000 permutations, each caption darker than the last. Billionaire's secret exposed. Hedge fund titan caught in forbidden love. Elara Quinn returns to burn Drake's empire. Cameron sat in his office, silk tie loosened, cufflinks still gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, staring at the screen as if he could delete reality with the swipe of a hand. If your pulse is already racing, hit that like button, because what happens next will make it impossible to look away. The penthouse terrace had been their sanctuary for months. He had convinced himself it was safe, private, untouchable, insulated by wealth, discretion, and obsessive planning. Elara was never supposed to exist outside that sphere, and yet here she was, splashed across the world, every detail dissected. The curve of her dress, the way her wrist brushed his chest, the tiny diamond glinting at her finger that hadn't been there 2 nights before. The irony wasn't lost on him. Cameron Drake, the man who measured everything in numbers, risk percentages, and fail-safes, had lost control of the one variable he thought unassailable: desire. Elara Quinn, 33, CEO of her own fast-rising hedge consultancy, was a force of nature. She had clawed her way from obscurity, from late-night shifts and student loans to the kind of luxury boardrooms that once intimidated her. And she hadn't just survived, she had dominated. Every strategy meeting, every public appearance, every whispered negotiation had been sharpened into a weapon. And now that weapon was aimed straight at the one man she had loved and almost destroyed. Cameron's phone buzzed again. A dozen messages, all urgent, a dozen people reminding him the fund is watching, the board is watching, the world is watching. And yet he couldn't stop staring at the image on the screen, at the curve of her neck, the intensity in her eyes, the audacity of her smile that seemed to mock the very empire he had built. He muttered, "Unbelievable." The truth was, it wasn't just a photo. It was every secret he had tried to bury, every risk he had justified in the quiet dark of penthouses and hotel suites, every fleeting moment of passion, every whispered stay, every clandestine meeting. They were now public, dissected, and weaponized. Elara, meanwhile, sat in her office nearly 50 stories below, overlooking the city skyline that shimmered like fractured glass beneath her. She didn't need to look at the headlines to know the storm was coming. They had planned for leaks, for threats, for rivals trying to pull them apart. But she hadn't expected the way it would feel to see Cameron so exposed, vulnerable, almost human in the glare of unwanted attention. Obsession didn't wait for timing, desire didn't knock politely, and neither had let go. Her phone rang. Cameron's name flashed across the screen. She answered without hesitation. "You knew it would leak," he said, voice low and tight. "I knew it could," she replied, deliberately calm, deliberate enough to make him ache. His pulse stuttered at that one word, delicious. The word carried all the weight of their past, all the sins of their obsession, all the second chances neither had earned, yet both craved. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say, "We have empires at stake." But the sound of her voice, the sharp clarity, the danger in every syllable, pulled him back into the orbit he had tried to escape. "You realize the board is watching," he warned, his thumb brushing against the screen as if he could physically erase her from his mind. "Victor will use this. Victor always uses this." "Let him," she said. "We've survived worse. You'll survive this. Or you won't, but I'm not walking away." Cameron closed his eyes, feeling the old ache of obsession and fear clash inside him. Elara hadn't just returned to his life, she had returned to dominate it. Every instinct screamed to protect her, to hide her, to destroy the threat, and yet every instinct screamed the opposite. Let her stay. Let her burn everything with you. The penthouse terrace became their war room that night. Dim lights, the city sprawled beneath them like a living scoreboard. Champagne on the table, untouched. The air between them was taut with unspoken tension, desire, and the knowledge that every second could be weaponized by the outside world. "You're trouble," Cameron said finally, his thumb brushing her cheek as though he could measure the heat behind her skin. "I know exactly what's at stake," she replied, tracing a finger along the cuff of his shirt. "And I don't care. Not anymore." The forbidden romance, the affair that had begun in secret boardrooms and private hotel suites, fueled by stolen glances, whispered confessions, and midnight power games, was now fully exposed. And yet, for both of them, exposure only heightened the obsession. Danger amplified desire, threats sharpened passion. Over the next 48 hours, the city transformed into a battleground. Investors whispered, rivals circled. Every client, colleague, and journalist sensed the vulnerability, the crack in the armor. Cameron's hedge fund, usually untouchable, wobbled. Elara's consultancy faced questions about alliances, loyalty, and the ethics of power. And in the eye of it all were two people addicted to each other in a way that could destroy them or make them unstoppable. If the intensity has you hooked, hit subscribe, because the next moves will be explosive. By the third morning, Cameron's world was a blur of calls, emails, and press inquiries. Yet he found a moment, a sliver of clarity, to call Elara. "Meet me," he said. No explanation, no hesitation. She didn't ask where. She didn't need to. She knew he would find her, as he always did. And they met in a private lounge beneath the skyline, a space chosen for privacy, luxury, and distance from the prying eyes of the world outside. Cameron's gaze found her immediately. She was everything he remembered and more. Power radiated from her like a halo, tempered by danger. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, black silk that moved like liquid with every step. The heels clicked like a warning as she approached. "You're trouble," he murmured, almost against his will. "You've been waiting for me," she said, voice smooth, dangerous, magnetic. Their conversation was short, charged, electric. Every word was a weapon and caress, threats and confessions. Every glance sparked fire that the world outside could never understand. Drop a comment if the tension between them has you holding your breath. Victor Langley, Cameron's longtime partner and rival, was waiting in the wings. Brilliant, merciless, and patient, he thrived on chaos. He had orchestrated part of the leak, ensuring the board and investors felt the tremor of the scandal. He arrived at the lounge that evening with the precision of a chess master, his presence a blade wrapped in silk. "You knew this was coming," Victor said, eyes sharp. "The leak wasn't random, it was calculated, and now the board is watching. If you can't contain it, the fund dies." Cameron's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to Elara, and in that instant, the chaos of the world outside ceased to exist. She smiled faintly, a half-mock, half-challenge that reminded him why obsession had never been optional for either of them. They left the lounge together, hands brushing, hearts clashing with every step. Outside, the city had become a living consequence of their actions, and neither could resist diving headfirst into the storm they had ignited. The penthouse terrace, once a sanctuary, became a stage for confrontation, confession, and desire. Cameron traced the line of her neck with a thumb, their proximity dangerous, intoxicating. "You could ruin me," he whispered. "Maybe I already have," she replied, lips brushing his ear. "But you don't regret it, do you?" Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story this addictive, because it doesn't get this intense anywhere else. As the night deepened, they moved like magnets, drawn together by a force stronger than logic. Every stolen touch carried the risk of exposure. Every kiss carried the possibility of empire collapse. But walking away wasn't an option. Desire, obsession, and second chances had entwined their fates, irreversibly. By dawn, the city below hummed, oblivious to the private wars waging above. Cameron and Elara had survived the first wave of exposure, but the storm was only beginning. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word promised that the fallout would test their empires, their obsession, and their fragile second chance at something neither of them had earned, and both desperately wanted. Morning broke over the city like a judgment. The skyline shimmered in gold and steel, but beneath that glinting veneer, the foundations of Cameron Drake's empire trembled. Headlines screamed scandal. Billionaire's secret affair goes public, and Elara Quinn returns to topple Drake. Investors called, partners demanded meetings, and social media had already begun drafting verdicts that could destroy him. Cameron sat in his office, tailored suit now slightly rumpled, the tie undone, coffee cooling on the glass table beside him. He stared at the wall of screens, tracking every trending hashtag, every news clip, every image of him and Elara. But for once, he wasn't thinking about the optics, the empire, or even the investors. He was thinking about her. Elara Quinn was the chaos he hadn't realized he'd been waiting for. If your heart is already racing, tap the like button now. This story only intensifies from here. Her office, 50 floors below, reflected a similar storm. Papers were scattered across the mahogany desk, a half-empty glass of wine catching the morning light. She didn't need confirmation that the world knew. She felt it. Every whisper, every glance, every forwarded photo was proof that Cameron's carefully constructed life was vulnerable and that the obsession binding them both was now public property. Their phones rang simultaneously. Cameron's ringtone, a soft, deliberate piano chord, cut the silence. He answered, hearing her voice like a promise and a warning. "We survived this," she said, blunt, confident, and magnetic. "Together or not at all." He gritted his teeth, knowing she was right. Every instinct screamed to protect, to hide, to shut down the exposure, but the magnetic pull of her voice reminded him of a truth he had never wanted to admit. Desire had already won. Subscribe now to witness every twist and high-stakes turn. This isn't a story that lets you breathe. By mid-morning, the first board meeting had been convened. The room was cold, every surface reflecting the calculated severity of power. Cameron entered with Elara at his side, the press unable to intrude, but the board and investors' eyes sharp, scrutinizing every move. Victor Langley, Cameron's longtime partner, orchestrator of some of the leaks, stood at the head of the table, calm as a storm before it breaks. "The leak was deliberate," Victor began, voice polished and lethal, "and until this scandal is contained, both of your companies are exposed. Every partnership, Every fund, every deal is now under scrutiny. The room was a pressure cooker. Investors whispered, some visibly anxious, others silently calculating the chaos for their advantage. Cameron's jaw tightened, but Elara's eyes met his with a fire that reminded him why he had loved and feared her. "You have one chance to survive this," Victor continued. "Either you manage the fallout together, or the consequences will bankrupt both of you. And this time, there will be no safety net." Cameron's voice cut through the tension, low, commanding, but laced with obsession. "Then we survive together. All of it." Elara's smirk was half challenge, half vow. "Good, because there's nowhere else to go." The fallout was immediate. Calls flooded their phones, demands from clients, threats from rivals, and the press circling like sharks. Every step, every interaction, every glance could topple careers or ignite obsession-fueled destruction. Yet through the chaos, their forbidden moments became sharper, more electric. A hand brushed a shoulder in a meeting. A look lingered too long during a board presentation. Every touch was loaded with consequence, every gaze a reminder of the fire that had never truly been extinguished. That evening, Cameron and Elara met in a private conference room after investors had left. The city sprawled beneath them, lights flickering like sparks across glass and steel. They moved toward each other cautiously, instinct and desire colliding. "If we can't control the fallout," Cameron's lips hovered near her ear, dangerous and intoxicating, "we at least can control us." Elara's response was a soft, dangerous smile. "Then let's take it all together." Their embrace was electric, obsessive, the kind that left every rational thought behind. For a moment, the world was just them. Desire, power, second chances intertwined in a dangerous ballet. Comment below if you think obsession can survive in the light of exposure, or if it always destroys everything it touches. The next days were a whirlwind. Every public appearance became a test of control. Every meeting a battlefield where ambition and obsession collided. Investors tested loyalty, rivals tested patience, and social media dissected their every move. But Cameron and Elara moved like predators in a game they both played their entire lives. Every calculated risk, every stolen glance, every whispered word became a weapon, a shield, and a confession all at once. One night, in the office that had become both a sanctuary and a cage, Cameron pressed her against the window, city lights reflecting like fire across her face. "I can't risk losing you," he whispered. "Not to the board, not to the press, not to anyone." "I know," she said, voice soft but unyielding. "Then don't. Don't let them win." Hit the like button if the tension between them has your heart racing. You're living every stolen moment with them. As the scandal reached its peak, Victor attempted one final manipulation, trying to exploit their exposure to seize control of the fund. But Cameron and Elara were no longer just two lovers caught in a storm. They were partners, synchronized in desire and strategy. Each move Victor made, each attempt to divide them, only made their bond sharper, more indestructible. Finally, after weeks of calculated exposure and public scrutiny, Cameron called for a press conference. The world was watching. Cameras, flashes, and expectant faces waited for confession or collapse. He stepped forward, Elara at his side, her presence a silent declaration that whatever the world threw at them, they would endure. "Elara Quinn and I, this is real," Cameron announced, his voice steady, controlled, magnetic. "And if anyone thinks a scandal can define us, they are wrong. We are partners in business and in life, and we will move forward together." Shockwaves rippled instantly. Some investors reeled, rivals recalculated. The public couldn't decide whether to cheer or condemn. But one truth was undeniable. Cameron and Elara had seized the narrative, transforming exposure into a display of obsession, love, and power fused into something unstoppable. Alone later that night, overlooking the city from the penthouse terrace where it all had begun, Cameron and Elara allowed themselves a moment of quiet. "No one can take this from us," he said, voice soft, almost vulnerable, yet filled with authority. "Not even the world," she replied, leaning against him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The storm had passed, or at least they had learned to navigate it together. Desire, power, second chances, and obsession had collided and emerged stronger, sharper, and more dangerous than ever. Every risk, every temptation, every whispered secret had forged a bond neither could sever. Subscribe now to follow every story where obsession, power, and forbidden love collide in ways you'll never forget. Cameron and Elara stood together, the city sprawling beneath them like a living testament to the chaos they had survived. In the end, survival wasn't measured in wealth or reputation. It was measured in desire, in obsession, and in the unrelenting refusal to let the worlds define the terms of their love. And as the skyline shimmered beneath them, one undeniable truth remained. Nothing could ever be ordinary again.